I've always considered myself cautious. I double-check the locks, avoid walking alone at night, and never share personal information online. But none of that mattered when I became the obsession of a man who refused to leave me alone. It started with small things. I live alone in a relatively safe neighborhood, and I've never had any issues before. But about 3 months ago, I noticed things outside my apartment weren't quite right. My trash cans would be knocked over in the morning, even though there was no wind the night before. Small footprints would be visible in the dirt outside my kitchen window. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe raccoons, maybe kids from a nearby park. But then I started getting the phone calls. They were always at odd hours, 1 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m. The number was always blocked. When I answered, there would be silence on the other end, followed by breathing. Deep, steady breathing, like someone was just listening. I told myself it was a prank, that maybe someone had the wrong number, but it didn't stop. It got worse. One night, I got a call around 2:30 a.m. I was half asleep, groggy, and annoyed, so I picked up and immediately snapped, "Who is this?" "Stop calling me." The response was a whisper, just 2 words. "Found you." I felt a chill shoot down my spine. I hung up and immediately blocked the unknown caller, though I knew it probably wouldn't do anything. I lay in bed, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling. I tried to convince myself it was just some idiot messing with me. But then my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. I didn't answer, but a voicemail came through. I hesitated before pressing play. The message was short, just breathing, and then, "Look outside." I didn't want to. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to stay put, to lock my bedroom door and call someone, but curiosity got the better of me. Slowly, I crept out of bed and pulled back the curtain just an inch to peer outside. My apartment is on the ground floor, facing a small parking lot. Under the dim glow of the street lamp, I saw him. A man stood just beyond the reach of the light, his face obscured by the shadows. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie, hands stuffed into his pockets. He wasn't moving. He was just staring at my window. I stumbled back, my breathing ragged. My first instinct was to call the police. But before I could even grab my phone, another text came through from another unknown number. "I see you." I called 911. The dispatcher kept me on the line as I stayed in my locked bedroom, waiting for the cops. By the time they arrived, the man was gone. They did a quick search of the area, but didn't find anyone. They assured me they patrol more frequently in my area and told me to call again if anything happened. For a while, nothing did. A week passed with no calls, no texts, no strange footprints outside my window. I started to relax, thinking maybe it was over. I was wrong. About 10 days later, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. I know I locked it before leaving. My heart pounded as I slowly pushed the door open, expecting, I don't know what, a ransacked apartment, a figure standing in the shadows, but nothing seemed out of place. Everything was exactly how I had left it. Still, a sick feeling settled in my gut. I checked the windows, locked. I checked the closets, empty. I checked under the bed, nothing. Then I saw it. On my nightstand was a single Polaroid picture. It was of me, asleep, in my bed. I ran. I didn't stop to grab anything. I didn't care. I bolted out of the apartment and drove straight to the police station. They took my statement seriously this time. Officers were sent to my apartment to investigate, but again, they found nothing. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. It was like he had just appeared. I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed a bag and moved in with a friend across town while I figured out what to do next. I installed security cameras in my apartment and waited. It took 2 days. At 3:07 a.m., the motion detector in my apartment sent an alert to my phone. I opened the security app with shaking hands, pulling up the live feed, and there he was, inside my apartment. The camera, positioned in the living room, caught him moving toward my bedroom. He moved slowly, methodically, his head slightly tilted as if listening. He reached my bedroom door, turned the knob, and walked in. The feed went black. I called the police again. They got there within minutes. But once again, the man was gone. The only sign that anyone had been there was a single Polaroid on my pillow. It was another picture of me. But this time, I was in my friend's apartment. I left town the next morning. It's been a month now. I'm staying with family in another state, trying to move on. I changed my number, deleted all my social media, even bought a new phone and laptop. But every night, I still check the locks 3, 4, 5 times. I still wake up in a cold sweat, convinced that I heard breathing in the dark. And yesterday, I got a package in the mail. No return address, no markings. Inside was a single Polaroid, a picture of me, standing at my mailbox. From that same morning, he's still watching.
Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more terrifying horror stories. It happened a few years ago, but I still remember every detail as if it happened yesterday. It was a typical Friday night, and I was home alone. My roommate, Jess, had gone to visit her parents for the weekend, so I had the whole place to myself. Our apartment was in a quiet neighborhood, one of those areas where nothing much ever happens. I was looking forward to a weekend of binge-watching shows and maybe a bit of self-care. I was in the living room, sprawled on the couch, with a bowl of popcorn on my lap and some random TV show playing in the background. It was around 10 p.m. when I first noticed it, a strange feeling, like I was being watched. At first, I shrugged it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. I glanced over at the window, but the curtains were drawn, and everything seemed normal. A few minutes later, I heard a faint noise coming from the backyard. It sounded like something rustling, like the wind blowing through the leaves. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was probably just a raccoon or some stray animal. But the noise kept going, steady and persistent. I muted the TV and listened closely. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on gravel. Slow, deliberate steps, moving closer to the house. My heart started racing, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I got up from the couch, tiptoeing to the window, and slowly pulled back the curtain, just enough to peek outside. There was a man standing in my backyard. He was facing away from the house, just standing there, still as a statue. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, and had his hands in his pockets. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. What was he doing there? I quickly let the curtain fall back into place, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Maybe he was just lost, or maybe he was a neighbor, but why was he just standing there, not moving? I decided to wait it out, hoping he would leave. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a coincidence, a random passerby. But then I heard the footsteps again. Slow, deliberate, like he was pacing back and forth. I couldn't help myself. I had to look again. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking. The operator picked up, and I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained what was happening. She told me to stay on the line, and that a patrol car would be there soon. I felt a little relieved, but the fear was still gnawing at me. I kept my eyes on the window, watching for any sign of movement. This time, he was closer to the house, almost directly in front of the window. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he seemed to be looking straight at me, through the curtain. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. A few minutes passed, and the footsteps stopped. I felt a surge of hope, maybe he had left. But then I heard something else, a soft tapping, like fingers drumming on glass. I looked up and saw a silhouette standing just outside the window. The curtains were thin, and I could make out the shape of his face, his nose almost touching the glass. He was staring right at me. I stumbled back, dropping the phone. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. I grabbed a kitchen knife, my hands trembling, and ran to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, the tapping echoing in my head. Then everything went quiet. I don't know how long I stood there, gripping the knife, waiting for something to happen. It felt like hours, but it was probably just a few minutes. I heard the distant sound of a siren approaching, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. When the police arrived, they searched the yard and the surrounding area but found no trace of the man. They told me it was probably just a prowler, someone looking for an easy target. They assured me they'd keep an eye on the neighborhood, but the look in their eyes told me they weren't convinced it was that simple. I never saw the man again, but for weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching, waiting. I moved out of that apartment a few months later, but I still get chills whenever I hear footsteps in the dark or a faint tapping on the window. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, and I guess I never will. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone, I can't help but wonder if he's still out there, waiting for the right moment to come back. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more terrifying horror stories. It was supposed to be the perfect weekend getaway. My wife, Emily, and I needed a break, a chance to escape the city noise, the stress of work, and the endless buzz of daily life. We booked a cozy cabin about 2 hours away, nestled in the woods by a serene lake. Just us, nature, and a weekend of peace. The drive up was smooth, almost too smooth. I remember thinking how quiet the roads were for a Friday evening. It was eerie but also refreshing, no traffic, no distractions. As we wound through the forest, the GPS flickered, losing signal here and there, but we had the direction saved. The cabin was isolated, tucked away from any neighboring houses. That was the appeal, after all, no people, just silence. When we arrived, the air was cool, the sun setting behind the thick trees, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. I killed the engine, and for the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Emily grabbed the keys from the visor and went ahead to unlock the door while I unloaded the bags. That's when I noticed it. There was a pair of boot prints in the dirt, large, heavy, and fresh. They led up to the front steps of the cabin. My first thought was maybe the caretaker had come by to check on the place before we arrived, but something about the size of the prints. I don't know, they just stuck with me. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was nothing. The cabin was exactly like the pictures online, rustic, clean, simple. But the silence inside was unnerving. We set down our things, and I tried to shake the feeling, but the hairs on the back of my neck stayed on edge. Emily noticed it too. We laughed it off as city paranoia. That night, after a glass of wine and a fire crackling in the hearth, we both began to relax. The night air was cool, and the only sounds outside were the chirping crickets and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. Around midnight, we headed to bed. That's when the real unease started. Sometime in the night, I woke up to the faintest sound. At first, I thought it was a dream, a soft creaking, like footsteps on the porch. I held my breath, trying to listen. Nothing. Emily was still asleep beside me, so I convinced myself it was just an animal passing by. But then I heard it again, closer this time, right outside the door. A shuffle, a scrape against the wood. My heart was racing now. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and crept to the window, pulling the curtain back just a fraction. There was nothing. Just the empty porch, bathed in moonlight. I went back to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, watching. I lay awake for what felt like hours, listening, waiting. Then, just as I started to drift off again, there was a loud bang, like something heavy had slammed into the side of the cabin. Emily shot up, her eyes wide with panic. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, my throat dry. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and motioned for her to stay put. Slowly, I moved through the cabin, my footsteps barely making a sound on the wooden floor. I checked the windows, the doors, everything was locked, but that didn't make me feel any better. Outside, the wind had picked up, howling through the trees. I peered through the kitchen window, my hand shaking slightly as I raised the flashlight. The beam swept across the porch and then, it caught something. A figure, just standing there at the edge of the tree line, motionless. I froze. It was too far to make out any details, but it was definitely a person. Just standing, staring at the cabin. I didn't wait. I rushed back to the bedroom, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. No signal. Of course. We didn't pack. We didn't grab anything. We just bolted for the car. The flashlight barely cut through the darkness, and every rustle in the bushes made my heart race faster. I cursed under my breath and grabbed Emily's hand. We're leaving. Now. I fumbled with the keys, and for a moment, I was convinced whoever, or whatever, it was would grab us before we could get inside. Finally, I got the car started. The headlights blazed to life, sweeping across the trees, and the figure was gone. I floored it, gravel spitting out behind us as we sped down the dirt road, not stopping until we hit the main highway. We never found out who that person was or what they wanted. We called the property owner the next morning, and he claimed no one should have been out there. No other cabins. No neighbors. I still think about that night sometimes, about how close we were to something, or someone. To this day, I don't know if it was just some local messing with us, or something far more sinister. But I do know one thing, we'll never go back to that cabin. Some places just aren't meant to be peaceful.